this series is sponsored by AARP, and it comes with this tagline, "Movies for Grownups," because I just saw Moana the other day. I mean, it's like there's the feel-good family favorite of the year, and then there's the movie for grownups. I mean, I think this is heavy, not feel-good entertainment, but I think really essential, storytelling. Where, as far as I'm aware, we all were kind of born after this happened. I mean, how did you even come to hear about this incident, Antonio?
Really?
This is 1974. But let's just say we are grown-ups.
I was born in the 90s, born in 83. I was born after this, but I still felt like when I heard about it through when I heard about the script, when it was a mutual friend of the screenwriter and myself, he wrote to me and said, "Hey, Craig Shilowich, who you know from film school, he has a script and I think you'll really like it. And it's about this woman, Chubbuck, who committed suicide live on the air in Sarasota in '74, and I felt like I'd heard about the story, and I felt like even like that maybe I had seen the footage, and I found later on that a lot of people think that, but I really didn't know anything about her, and the great thing was I learned about her through reading the script, so it was a really special way to learn about her, to really get to know her, because Craig had done so much research, and he had put so much of himself into the story, because he connected so much with the character, so that by the end I felt like I really formed a connection with her, and that's the way you should learn about a character like this, a person like this, as opposed to like a Wikipedia page or something like that.
Or some sort of like renegade videotape that doesn't exist.
Exactly.
I mean, how did the screenplay find its way to you, Rebecca?
Conventionally, I got sent it, and it arrived with a cover letter that gave a sort of 5-line synopsis of what the film was. And I didn't know about Christine Chubbuck. I don't think I knew anything, not even peripherally, not even vaguely. It's sort of when I read the blurb, I actually thought about Network, and then I sort of thought how interesting and how odd, and I was also very shocked and very frightened, because when you read a sort of 5-line reductive blurb on this film, it sort of serves to pinpoint how she exists without the film, if you see what I mean, as this sort of reductive act, like as in her whole life is reduced to this act. And that is and it was an incredibly violent, shocking thing that she did. And so when I read that blurb, I thought, I'm a little frightened. But I knew I had to read the script, because it was intriguing and fascinating and so shocking. And I knew also that I had a hunch that, like any story, there has to be, or anyone that is deemed it becomes notorious for something horrible, there has to be a person behind it, there has to be a story behind it. And when I read the script, I was so moved by such a poignant, immediate tale of someone breaking down, and the compassionate way and the sensitive way in which that was told, and how the script humanized this person that otherwise is the stuff of tabloid, actually. And there's something interesting, because tabloid, and I keep thinking about this the more I talk about it, in tabloid journalism, which is something that the film deals with, in a sense, looks at something, it gives you the illusion of intimacy to a story, whilst also highlighting how far away you are from that person, how different you are from that person who's a monster or a horror story or a shock or whatever it is. And for me, reading this script and the film, when I watch it, it inverts that. It collapses the distance and makes you contemplate how close you are to that person who did something that violent and that horrible. And I think that's valid and important, because that's humane. You didn't ask me any questions that relate to that, but I just kept on talking. Sorry,
how many people in this room sort of knew this story or remember this story from kind of back when? I mean, even then it was sort of a small incident that inspired, one of the great American films, it kind of indirectly network, but I mean, coming into the movie today, how many of you knew the ending beforehand? Is that sort of everybody, or was it a surprise for some of you? Yeah, I mean, like, God, what a twist ending if you don't know. I mean, how, approaching this as filmmakers, do you deal with that? The idea that the information is going to be out there, and there's almost an anticipation for this kind of ghastly conclusion. At the same time, what you so beautifully expressed there is this idea that the movie's not about that at all. It's about everything else. It's about who she was, and it's about reclaiming her from, what sort of this incident.
Yeah, but we can't divorce them.
No, I mean, the sad thing is if she didn't do the act, and would we have made a movie about her? Would we have known about her?
Right.
So that is the sad truth about it. But in constructing the film, we knew we had to make the film for those who knew and those who had no idea. And we didn't want to make a film about, there is a version of this film where you start off and you're like, this is, you start off with the last scene, and then you're like, how does it get there? And we weren't interested in that. We were interested in her and her daily life and just sort of watching her and living with her, and then sort of seeing bit by bit how things kind of unravel and how she gets to the place she gets to. But, not knowing where she's getting to, but just sensing that something is going to happen. And the other thing that was really important was to also maintain some sense of hope. That it wasn't all futile. Like she's still trying. She's always trying. And even my wife, who edited the film, Sophia Picasso, was here. And she and I, we watched the film, thousands of times, or whatever. And there's still part of us having rewatched it, where you're like, oh, maybe you forget, oh, maybe she's not going to do it this time. And you really hope she won't. You know she will, and and it was even on set when we had to get to that day and shoot that scene. It was sad, and when we actually shot that scene, the day after we shot it, Rebecca left, and then she was gone, and so we really felt like Christine had left, and that we were shooting these scenes post suicide, and it was really heartbreaking and sad.
There's also a sense almost that, rewatching it again tonight, that even though I know that that's what it builds up to and I kind of know how the story ends, there's this kind of threat that lurks throughout the film of other things. Will this date go terribly awry? Will he take advantage of her, cripple her, what little, kind of strength she has, all these kind of things, where it's almost constructed, that's an observation less than a question, but maybe to pose it as a question, I mean, one thing that I admire here is just the intensity of this performance. I mean, I can't remember having encountered a character on screen in a long time who just kind of comes across with that force, and yet is so kind of fragile. You see her cracks. I mean, what was that like to play and find?
Well, it was the most challenging and in the true sense, not in the sort of casually used sense of the word, complex role that I've ever had to do. She holds, and this was written this way, but it was something I thought about a lot, is that she constantly holds opposing things at once. That she has this inability to let anything go, and this sort of sense of things deeply affect her, but at the same time, she's doing a performance of someone that doesn't do that and can. But like you say, it was constructed in a way so that these things, one could play one thing at a time, because things came at her, and it was a question of, for me it was plotting a journey that every day there's something that's going to make her not do that thing that happens in the end. And every day it's like she gets up and she goes, well, today if I succeed at this particular aspect of my work, then I'll make it, then I'll survive. And today, if I make friends with this coworker, then I'll survive. Or if I have a date, then I'll survive. Or if I have a nice conversation with my mum, then I'll survive. It's active. It's not, there's a common, it's ironic. There's a common misconception about depression, actually, that it's sort of, that people with depression don't laugh or don't crack jokes or don't do things that are energetic. And for me, the basis of my characterization was that she is active. She's not passive. She's actually desperately trying to survive. And that's wherein lies the tragedy. She's incapable of asking for help. She doesn't see the people around her that want to help her. She doesn't know how to be. She keeps constantly performing different versions of herself, which she thinks are going to be more successful. And yet, at the same time, she's nothing but herself all the time. And she's idiosyncratic and bizarre and unusual. But, she's also performing. So all these sort of contradictions are held. And I have no idea how I did that. I know you're about to ask me, so how do you do it?
That's the alchemy, the sort of magic of it. But one of those paradoxes is she's amazingly adult. I mean, she's basically the adult in the relationship with her mother. She has to be, as this independent woman at work, and yet
she's also trapped in a sort of adolescence of the carpenters and
her bedroom, and also just this sense of kind of you feel like she's kind of. We can all kind of identify kind of faking it. Are they going to find out that I'm not really, kind of?
I think the sort of the notion of someone moderating and constructing their self, which she's in a world where she's literally looking at herself, and it's brilliant the way, this one and Craig constructed it so that you could see her literally editing herself and cutting it and redoing it and thinking about, and this sort of notion that we monitor how we project ourselves into the world is something that we can all relate to. I mean, you see it on social media, right? On a sort of trivial level. You see people sort of saying, "Oh, I'm having this great time at this restaurant," and it's not. They'd had it 2 weeks ago. And yet, we kind of, we have this sort of premium on authenticity and being true to yourself. And so does Christine. She has that sense of integrity, and I'm going to be true to myself, but she's also constructing it. And she's terrified that she's getting it wrong. And I think there's something very heartbreaking about that and relevant somehow.
What were your sort of reference points as other films or period things? I mean, obviously Network is a reference point, but also, I mean, I'm reminded of broadcast news because you have these strong female, news anchors there, and the whole, what you're saying there reminds me of kind of is it cheating to sort of refilm yourself crying on camera? And yet it opens with her doing this kind of audition for an imaginary interview with this, and there's humor to that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But just kind of what other movies were you looking at? What and media? I mean, how much access to her own material?
We only had about 14 minutes of her. It was this one.
14? I've been saying 15.
Might get called out and get the fat check on that. It's something. It's between 14 and 15. Don't worry. But that was it. It was this one this talk show that's one of the boringest talk shows you've ever seen. But there's so much there if you're looking at her. If you turn it on, you would be turn it off after a minute. But you're there and it's about zoning. It's a zoning story about this about the hospitals in Sarasota, and she's talking to these three people on this very boring set.
I'm already falling asleep.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you see in her doing?
Well, you see someone struggling. You see someone kind of trying to sort of figure it out. Sort of, what am I feeling right now? What is this? I think it was pretty close to recorded pretty close to towards the end of her life.
Is there that sense that
there's a tightness to her too? There's a lot of stuff. I mean, there's
she's
a lot
very
of stuff
self-conscious, and she's definitely she's doing that thing that I think sometimes politicians do, of sort of very slow and deliberately, which I kind of, I found that was a sort of key for me. Or there's something in that.
And the resting face, there was a sadness to it.
Yeah, definitely.
The resting face.
Definitely.
But yeah, I mean, where do you go? I mean, there was broadcast news was definitely a reference. We looked at that, and and you thought about network, obviously. Other just, I think we always kind of go back to 70s filmmaking. For some reason, it's a pinnacle. I think American 70s filmmaking, and even stuff like Killing of a Chinese Bookie. I don't know. There was all this stuff. We were going everywhere. I remember watching Godfather a lot. I watched Godfather regularly. Chinatown, but Rosemary's Baby.
Oh yeah.
There was a bit of that.
Three women.
Three women, of course. Three women is like direct reference for her apartment in the film, and the bug, and also the sort of framing her sort of center frame, thinking about how Christine would have framed herself in a frame, and sort of putting her at the center whenever she was in the scene.
I mean, in a way, it's almost like she seems to be aspiring to have a movie made about her, or be the center of something, as you're saying. It's like where that's just to be promoted and whatever. But was that earnestness there in her? Like the idea that even a zoning story is the most important story of the week?
Yeah, without question. I mean, that's the thing that comes up, and I think that's a fundamental thing about her. I mean, this is someone who desperately wanted to be famous for doing good.
Right.
For doing the right thing and presenting the news. And how we choose to present the news is something that goes on. We're still talking about it now. I mean, if it bleeds, it leads. Clickbait. It's an ongoing discussion about how society presents. And she wanted to be famous for doing that well, and she wasn't. And she got famous for blood and guts. And I don't know. There's something kind of moving to me that now she stands a chance of having some sort of fame for the conversations that she encourages when you walk out from having seen this film, rather than the blood and guts.
It's so interesting because when you look at Christine, it's like if Christine was alive today, she would have fit in Williamsburg. She would be this weird oddball character, and I think she would have fared a lot better than she did in '74.
Talk about, because this is a moment, that you're capturing. Christine becomes the way into kind of a transition point in media. It's and I mean, if it bleeds, it leads kind of thing is that philosophy basically won. And we are all the children of that. Sensationalized, kind of news. And I mean, there's no way that you could make a zoning story, even if it is the most important thing going on in your community. You couldn't get it on air now. It's it just wouldn't happen. I mean, to what extent is it, was this film an opportunity to kind of comment on or present just that, to go back to and observe the kind of moment the crack started,
Yeah, I mean, it was trying to, it offered that. I mean, it is that, but the reason to make this film was Christine, and she touched on, and she was a way into all these kind of things, and a way of exploring not only that aspect of the news, but also stuff about reality TV and what we're and also this fascination with watching ourselves and filming ourselves, and putting yourself on camera for such an extreme act, which is also something else people love to do.
She's a harbinger for a lot of things.
Yeah,
we're still talking about mental health issues, suicide, gender, how we value success. How important it is to succeed. As a kind of indication for your worth as a person. So many things. It's
yeah, there are 1,000 points by which people can identify with this.
Yeah.
It's a weird coincidence that at Sundance there was another movie about Christine Chubbuck that was kind of this faux documentary.
Yeah.
That was an exploration of how an actress plays this character. That movie seems to kind of almost make too much out of that question. I mean, could it have been as hard a wrestling match for you to deal with? I mean,
I haven't seen it because I'm a little frightened about the whole, you can't possibly play Christine aspect of it. I don't know. People say things to me about this, did you take it? Was it harrowing? And how could you have done something like that and put yourselves through that darkness and all the rest of it. And I understand what they're saying, but also that sort of feels, it's difficult to express this, but that's to indulge in that, to give in, to like let that be, it feels like a sort of, it feels almost like fetishizing her, and sort of, it feels like a kind of adolescent indulgence that I'm gonna, revel in the darkness about it. If doing anything, if doing this role taught me anything about how to live my life, it was to live it. And live it fully, and live it richly. And, I just wanted to go home at the end of that and say, okay, Christine, I'm putting you away now, and I'm gonna remember what's great about my life. And I felt a service to do this as an artist. I was like, this story needs to be told. It's valid, it's important. It's got so much humanity. I need to do this. It's not about my ego wrestling with being in a dark place. It's about getting a story out there. And that's more important. That trumps anything else.
It's crazy too to say you can't play, to say that you can't play a role, because that means that you can't understand her.
Yeah, and
say that you can't understand somebody's suffering.
Everyone is.
The point is that you can understand her, and then you can, people, you can understand her, even if you haven't had suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
You can understand so much about her. The only difference between us and Christine, a lot of us and Christine, is just that she chose to put a gun to her head, and she chose to put a gun to her head in front of an audience, But there's really not that much difference between her and us, and the idea to make such a meal about trying to understand her, I think is I don't know. I understand that film is very much about the actor's process, and so for me that film isn't so much about Christine as it is about Kate trying to do this thing and the impossibility of that thing, because you can't become somebody else. But what you do in that process is you learn about them through understanding yourself, and then you can't ever know somebody else. Even the people closest to her couldn't know Christine and tell us what she was thinking about.
Well, that's it, and that's what's really actually, I think, brilliant about how you, and this is you, how you made this film, is that it really does point out that there's a difference between sympathizing with someone and feeling compassion for someone and knowing someone, because you can feel for her, you can relate to her. But at the same time, you hold all of the competing narratives about this person who is essentially unknowable. Because everyone who knew her will have no different things about her. And who knows, and no one is truly knowable. It doesn't matter how much footage you have on someone. When they're gone, they're gone. And you can't grasp that thing. And the film doesn't claim her to be a macabre heroine. It doesn't claim her to be a sort of depressed spinster. It doesn't claim her to be someone who failed because they couldn't work or whatever it was. But it holds all of those narratives and says, we don't know. But even though we don't know, you can still care about her. And that's something.
Yeah. I think that the one thing that I try doing with the camera is to not to judge the character, not to judge whoever's in front of the lens. And that's sort of the way I approach life and the way that I interact with people. And it's more to try and spend time with a character so that by the end we understand them a little bit better. But we accept the fact that we'll never know them completely.
When you realize it's a political act, the way she does it, it's not just a suicide on it.
Yeah, that's it. But it's so complicated, so fraught. It's like,
yeah, of course. Well, we've got time for a couple questions from the audience. I almost don't see any hands. There's a hat wearer there, whose gender I can't even tell. I'm sorry.
Really well done, and she almost feels like fail-safe to Network's Doctor Strangelove. It was extremely, the tone was really wonderful, it thread a very difficult needle. My question is about Boston. Did you shoot something and then decide just to keep it mysterious, and was it part of the author's imagination? What's the deal with Boston?
Boston was this thing. We never shot anything in Boston. It was just this thing that happened. We all have things that we talk about, and you refer to them as that, whatever word you assign to it. But it was based on something that we knew happened to Christine, where she had a previous kind of meltdown and potentially another suicide attempt. And so, coming to Sarasota in the real life of Christine was to get better and to sort of to try and start again. And that was Boston was where things kind of fell apart, and Sarasota where she was trying to get it back together again. So we never shot anything in Boston, but Boston, represented that and was that for the actual Christine.
You're right to detect the ghost there.
Yeah, and then there's the track "Please Come to Boston" is in the film.
All right, I'm going to try and look into the murky shadows. I'm not succeeding at all, so I'm going to go here. Yes.
Me? Okay. To get away from the emotionality for just a minute, I'm curious as a producer how difficult or how long it took you to get, for instance, if you can talk about the production, getting the money for this movie, exactly that look. And maybe even how your representatives felt about you telling them, I want to star in this movie.
The question is about some of the logistics from a producer. The logistics, can you boil that down? I mean, that's kind of a long narrative, but in terms of budget, schedule, and convincing people this was a legitimate project.
Well, we're kind of legitimate people, we're not coming out of nowhere. The script was very good, but yeah, no, it took a long time to get the.
Amazing.
It wasn't easy. Yeah, it wasn't like, oh, you want to make a film about a woman who commits suicide live in the air?
Yeah,
yeah. How much money do you
Good change.
Where do I sign?
The product was lining up. I mean.
No, it was hard. I mean, it was hard, but it took a long time. And I mean, it took us a long time. Rebecca was very patient.
I signed up, and then it was about a year before we got it made. In fact, it got me essentially saying to my agents, WME, as much as I know you would like me to work in all these other jobs, I'm not going to do anything until we get the financing for Christine, because I want to make it, which kind of helped.
No, but that's what you need. Is you need people that are going to stand by you and be committed to a thing like this, because it is. I mean, to make a movie is already such an impossible task, and but then to make a movie that's very challenging about a subject matter that people might find hard to imagine an audience wants to see and all that stuff. It's like, it's a challenge, and you need your creative team to be behind you 100%, and that's what we had, and then eventually what happened was we were looking to try and put financing together. We were looking different places and looking maybe to piecemeal it, which is the way that we've made a lot of films in the past. But then out of nowhere, this guy Robert Holme came around Great Point Media and said, finance the whole thing. And we're like, I remember I got that call and I was like, yeah, right. Bullshit. And then there was like, no, we talked. It seems really like real. And I was like, yeah, okay, well, let's see. And then the lawyers started talking. And I was like, all right, well, maybe. And then eventually we got the contract, and it was happening. And he was like, yeah, we'll start sending you money before we finish the contract. And that's when when people start being too nice, at some point you get really jaded in making independent films. Like something's going to happen, and you never. Great Point Media was so, they believed in the film from the very beginning, and they were like that through the end, yeah.
It's not just about ambition, it's about integrity and people trying to put, what they believe in out there, and I feel like that's something that you guys stuck to in bringing this to the screen. So thank you for fighting that good fight. I hope you guys all appreciated it. Thank you. Remember, you're not allowed to become an opposed to talent, but please vote tomorrow, and then in your respective guilds, remember Rebecca.
Thank you.